So it's a guarantee that in this life we will have trials and tribulations and challenges. But the question really is, how will we handle those and what will we use them for?
Welcome to the Level Up Ministries podcast. My name is Joey Bonfiglio.
And I'm Sandy Bonfiglio. Thank you so much for tuning in. So our podcasts are all about leveling up our minds, our health, our faith, our relationships. So last week's podcast was all about discovering our gifts and how we really find the most joy when we're in our gifts and utilizing our gifts. Today's podcast is called Use It for Good. So in the Gospel of John, in chapter 16, verse 33, Jesus says, "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." So essentially, Jesus is saying that we will have trouble. He says when we have trouble. So it wasn't an if, it was a when. So it's a guarantee that in this life we will have trials and tribulations and challenges. But the question really is, how will we handle those and what will we use them for? So in your book, How to Build a Level Up Mindset, you mention the health challenges that you went through, whether they were physical or emotional, and how you've kind of worked through them and handled them. So let's start off there. Tell us about some of the challenges that you've had.
Yeah, so I think it started, I forget what year it was, but initially it was, a lump that I had over my gums, and I couldn't, it didn't hurt or anything like that, but it was just like like this little small pea-sized lump, and, when I went to the dentist, I figured, right away they've seen so many mouths, like they would be able to diagnose it, and the dentist had this strange look, and he probed and he did some tests, and couldn't figure it out, and I was like, he's like, well, it's not the C word, but we're going to send you to a specialist. And so then from there I went to a specialist, and so I figured, well, this guy's going to definitely right away know. And it was kind of like the same thing like this. I'm kind of observing him, and it took him 50, there was silence for 15 seconds, which again, I'm like, wow, he didn't really know right away what it was. So again, he did some other tests that were different, and then ultimately, and he was asking does this hurt? Does it? And I'm like, nope. But ultimately he's like, all right, we're going to schedule for a root canal. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, this guy doesn't know what it is, and neither did my other dentist. I'm definitely not going to go through with that. But I went through the motions, went to the front desk there and got an appointment made. But I'm like, there's no way. And then, talking with you, when you were able to you were talking to Steph at work, and her brother does acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And you had mentioned, hey, give this a try, and so I'm like, hey, I've tried everything else. Why don't I? I'm up for it. And I just remember going there, and I'm like, this is hokey, acupuncture. I've never done anything like that, and it was kind of woo woo, or if you will. And and Craig was great because he just explained. He's like, listen, it's it's an infection that the blood can't circulate, can't get up there. And I think it was after 3 weeks of going to him, it dissipated and went away. And it was at that point where I was like, okay, this holistic approach might be the way for a lot of different things. So that's where everything kind of started, and then there was more, along the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want me to go into that too, but
well, just in thinking about experiences like that. So for example, how God uses everything for our good and nothing's wasted. So I think about that time and how you were able to connect with Craig, who has become now a long life friend.
Yeah.
So how God utilizes our trials and challenges to connect us to people, to help us help other people. And I just think now, here it started with me. It was my friend at work who then connected you to Craig, who has helped you in other areas of your life, not just acupuncture itself.
Right. Well, what's amazing too is a few other things transpired with my gluten allergy that I think I spoke about it in another podcast, but maybe not going into too much detail. But I was getting a rash, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And again, same thing. It was like, oh, it's a food. Did some blood. Well, no, actually, didn't even do some blood work. Went to doctors, and they're like, oh, it's contact dermatitis. Change your laundry detergent. Like all these different things. And it wasn't until, again, I went to a naturopath. This was, I think, prior to Craig, but who had said, oh, we'll do some blood work, but it sounds like food sensitivity. And this is back in 2012 when, the whole gluten thing was, again, like this woo-woo thing. And was that real? What is a gluten allergy?
Yeah.
And I didn't even believe it. So I got the test results back, and it was like, they don't tell you, like, you have a gluten allergy. It's you rate high in these sensitivity areas based on if you're having almonds, everything, barley, from honey, like everything. And I didn't even buy it at the time. I didn't believe it. I'm like, this is. And then we went to the Cheesecake Factory like that weekend. Had a big bowl of pasta, and I remember, I was
in rough shape,
curled up in a ball in my stomach. It was the worst pain, I was going through. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's something to that. So I'm like, let me try not eating these gluten-based things. And sure enough, it. So, and then from that, to just go back to Craig, fast forward to just last year, playing hockey, I got an issue with my sciatic nerve in one of the games. And again, it was one of those things where it's like, oh, my back hurts, it'll go away. I bounced back pretty easy from like injuries. I really never had a major one, but this one just wouldn't go away. And went to, now that we're in Florida, I don't have access to Craig for acupuncture, so I went to a friend of mine who does who's a chiropractor, and he put me on this like plan, and it worked temporarily, but it never went away. And then we came across this this X39 device that was like a game changer that mimics your light energy. Which is funny because all these patches you're put on almost like acupuncture points in your body, similar to like what Craig does with acupuncture. But anyway, this little patch that it's all natural and only has salt, sugar, and amino acids, and it just reflects. You put it on for 12 hours, and it reflects your own body heat to elevate your copper peptides, which then stimulates your stem cells. So. Again, this is a thing that somebody had recommended to me at church. That again, I'm maybe it's hokey or maybe it's doing something, but it was a game changer. After 6 weeks of using it, my. And
I think you wouldn't have obviously it helped you, and so that was proof that it works. But I think connecting with Craig and knowing that Craig knew those acupuncture points, and so it made sense. Yet if you didn't have that information prior, you might have been more skeptical and not even used it. And and I think that's how God builds those relationships, and how He helps and leading you along the way. It's like you've met these people and gathered all this information, so that when you get to a point where you need something, that you're more apt to do it, or that you're just you have more information to be able to help you.
Right, and I think because I was such a skeptic of these things, it makes me almost like the perfect person to want to help other people. Because again, coming across, like when I tell people like, oh, I'm doing intermittent fasting, or I'm doing these different things like the patch, or acupuncture, or I'm the first one to say, hey, that's too woo woo or hokey, but for me it's been a game changer. Now, I mean, we could take a step back even further. Right after I think we got married, when I had acid reflux, and I went to the doc, right? So I was having trouble sleeping, however, and I went to the doctors, and they just gave me Protonics. They gave me this this drug that I took for 30. I had to take it for 30 days, and about 90 days later, my hair started falling out in patches.
You lost a whole eyebrow.
Yeah, a whole eyebrow gone. And I'll have to dig up some pictures. Maybe we can include in the podcast. But it was, and we couldn't figure out because it was 90 days later, all this stuff was happening. I had changed doctors. It was a weird transitional time when we had first gotten married, because my doctor had retired. He was my pediatrician since I was a kid. So, my hair's falling out in different places, and I'm like, what is going on? And it wasn't the person that figured it out was the pharmacist at CVS. They're like, have you taken any medication in the last 6 months? And And I'm like, yeah, these protonics or whatever. So long story short, in the manual it says what the side effects are, like in bullet form, but on the back in very fine print it says 1% of people might experience, acne, all these different things, and hair loss was one of them. And the woman said for every pill you took, it's going to take 3 days for your hair to grow back or whatever. So because I took it for a month, it was, it took me 3 months to start growing back. So I had to shave my head completely just because it looked weird. It was like literal big patches of hair, as if I got into a fight with a cat or something.
I remember that there was hair on their pillow when you'd wake up in the morning. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. So all that's to say, I'm just grateful that I took that chance of, I was like I was in tune to realize, okay, these professionals, I'm figuring they're going to know what they're doing, and or not that they don't know what they're doing, but they've seen so many of these examples that they would know right away what the issue was, and because they did, I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to just, oh, it's a root canal, yeah, let's go through with that, and they're going to rip your tooth out, and there's all kinds of side effects with that when they when they take teeth out unnecessarily. So
well, I think there's so much about our bodies that we just cannot know. Yeah. It's like God made these complex bodies, and I completely respect doctors, and they do the best that they can to try and help, but at the end of the day, our bodies are complex. But God also, gave us this immune system and this system that can also help heal itself if given the right environment. And I think that's something that we've learned throughout our journey, which is how we can also help other people.
Right.
And so I think as far as how God uses what we go through for good, that our trials and our stories and our testimonies are for us to help and serve other people. Yeah. I think about myself with chronic Lyme. So I've had chronic Lyme now for about 11 years. When I first started to see symptoms, I think it was hard because I was working full time. We had just had Alex, so we have 3 children. We have 3 little kids, all within 5 years. I was exhausted. I was working, as a special education teacher, which is an exhausting profession. And so I started having some major fatigue. In particular, I was getting some weird rashes. And so I just remember every time I went to the doctor, they were asking, are you stressed? Are you sleeping? And I'm like, well, yeah, I am stressed. No, I'm not sleeping great. And they were mentioning, your fatigue is just because you're exhausted, you're overworked. And I said, okay. And so I would go back to work. But I just knew that I wasn't right. Especially when I started having digestive issues. I'm like, something just is not right with me. And then I got shingles across my chest.
That, yeah.
And it was so painful.
That was scary.
And
because you could visibly see it too. It was like it was out of nowhere.
Yeah, right. It just happened, and all of a sudden it was like my entire chest had shingles. And at that point I'm like, okay, something is really wrong. And it was just strange. My blood work was okay. There were some things that were low, but there was nothing that really showed that there was a severe issue. And so I just was getting overwhelmed by that. And I remember there was a point, and I forget what year it was, and maybe, it was 3 years in here. So here, I've struggled. I don't really know what's going on. So maybe about 3 years in, and I remember, a Thanksgiving where I was laying on the couch and I was so fatigued that I could not go.
Right.
And so that was the first time where all of you left without me. And I was laying there thinking to myself, what is happening?
Yeah.
Lord, this cannot be happening, where I can't join my family. Please help me know, what is wrong, because I need to fix this. Yeah. And so that was when things really started for me, as far as leaning into the Lord, but trying to figure out just some answers. And so I think one piece in how God uses trials for good is that He brings you closer to Him. So that was where my relationship with God really started to develop, because I needed some answers and some hope. Because I was in my early 30s at the time. And, I wanted to be able to play with my kids. I remember sitting on the front step of the house one day. Our oldest son, Nicholas, was throwing the football, and he asked me to play, and I couldn't. I was so exhausted that I said that I couldn't, and I thought for a moment, like, oh my gosh, like, when we have trials and tribulations, it's not just physical, especially when, there's something physical going on. It becomes a mental and emotional concern as well. And so I remember God, too, bringing some people into my life. I had met a few individuals. Some were doctors, some were like naturopaths that I connected with. And others were some people at work who kind of had reached out to me who I hadn't really talked to very much. And another one was a neighbor that I connected with. So, during that time, I'm creating these relationships, and God's helping me create these relationships with people who I wouldn't have necessarily, especially because I had to take time off of work.
Yeah.
So during that time that I had at home, I was able to connect. I was able to reflect on more. And now, essentially, I've been able to serve and help a lot of people who have had similar struggles. And so I am so grateful that nothing that we go through is wasted.
Right.
And so it gives me comfort to know that whatever I am walking through, that God's going to use it for somebody else. Yeah. So it is not going to be a waste. And that encourages me and gives me comfort for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting too, like how you say, God puts people in your life, because even for me, well, just even going back, just piggybacking off, not having enough strength or energy to go to Thanksgiving, now this was prior to your incident, but it was when I was going through the gluten allergy, when I didn't believe I had it. It made me so lethargic that I remember when you were taking, I think we had just had Alex. Mm-hmm. So we only had Alex at the time, and you were going to the mall, and it was like a Sunday afternoon, and I was exhausted, and it's like I wanted to go, and I couldn't. And I remember I was 34 years old, because I remember when you guys left, and I'm sitting on the couch, like wanting to go, and I'm going, wow, like I'm 34 years old and I feel like this. What am I going to feel like when I'm in my 60s? Like I really was like concerned, because I shouldn't be this tired at 34 years old. Yeah. So that's, kind of that piece. But
it was Nicholas, by the way.
Did I say Alex?
Yeah.
Oh, Nicholas. Yeah, Nicholas. First. So, and then the interesting thing too is like talking about putting people in your life. When I was going through, the other piece with, the loss of my dad and the emotional side, I was working at Lego at the time, and I'll never forget when I started Lego. There was, I was introduced to my team, and there's one gentleman in particular who's one of my really, really good friends, is Tim, and Tim is he's an intellect. Like again, this is where. I feel like, there's certain people that are on just a different level intellectually that, like I'll try to hang with, but, and that's probably me selling myself short or whatever. But I'm like, he's like, it's such a great, it's so great to meet you. I can't wait to, work together and, yada, yada, yada. And I'm thinking like, this guy's not going to want to hang, like talk and hang with me and whatever. But long story short, when I was going through the things I was going through, the loss of my dad and the gluten, or the staph infection and layoffs at work, we had connected because his mom was, we had already connected before that, but I just remember his mom wasn't doing well. And, knowing what I went through with my dad, I made that connection with him. And we've been on this spiritual journey ever since, when we're just always looking for different ways, like, through more meditation and stuff like that, but just trying to figure out our purpose here and what we're doing, and we're just realizing, the more we serve others and show gratitude and have gratitude, the better we feel, and the better we can help. I don't want to say change the world, but again, actually speaking of that, I just saw the video with the naval officer that talks about making your bed.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you want to change the world, start with making your bed. It's like doing that first action per day, sets you up for doing, repeated good habits. But again, just put through that process and reaching out and trying to see where somebody else is. It's like you make these connections and you just want to, help other people. And I think through this, like you said, meeting Craig, just meeting other people, and then what happens is God puts all these other people that have these similar ailments in your path. That's like, oh, by the way. And it's like, what's funny is that when we first got down here, you connected with Maureen, who is a blood specialist who diagnosed you with Lyme. And then as the days and weeks go by, we're meeting people at church, and you're able to share your story and connect them with her. And she's had so many different people come through her and then relay that back to you. So it's like you never know who you can help, or who's going to come into your life, or why. You might be going through this certain ailment, or this certain, you might be in a valley right now, but you might be in that valley because it's going to help somebody else in the future. And I'll add to that too. I'm like, now it's like all these other things are coming to me, but even like the loss of my dad and your mom, which is crazy, because we felt like of all our family members, they were probably the healthiest ones, and they were the first to go. And it's for, there's really no other family members as far as our cousins' parents, other than Jimmy, that where they've lost a parent, and it's like, we always ask these questions like, why did they leave us so soon, and why do we have to go through this? Why are we going through this? We together, and then it's like, if you look at it a different way, it's like, well, maybe the blessing in it is that we are going through it together. I know what it's like to lose my dad, and now you're going through it with your mom. I can help you, and we're helping each other. But we're also, I think God's preparing us for when our aunts and uncles pass, and our cousins are going to have to go through something similar, and hopefully we can be there to help them as well.
And actually, while my mom was ill, we had talked about Stephanie and Craig. Stephanie's mom was also ill, and so our moms passed very close to each other. And so we were able to be a support for one another as well. And it's just a testament to how God moves in our life, and how He is always looking out for us, and how, again, no matter what, that everything is going to be used for good. And so we just want to encourage you that if you are in the valley, if you are struggling, if you have trials, one, to just take a moment to be intentional in looking at your circumstance to see, who is God putting into my life to help support me, but also who is God putting in my life to help support while I am walking through this. And even after you walk through it, and after, you've kind of gone through that struggle, who is it that I can help and serve now that I've gone through this? And so it is just our encouragement to you to lean into God, and just know that He is with you, that He is leading you and supporting you, and that there is a plan in all of this, and that everything will be used for good, and it's never wasted. And so we thank you so much for tuning in with us today.
Thank you, guys. Take care. We'll see you next episode.
Bye-bye.